Welcome. I'm Jennifer Boyott, the host of A Conversation with Leading Peacemakers. This is the 7th edition. It is time for our leaders to be peacemakers and for peacemakers to be our leaders. I'm really excited that I've gathered another really special group of people with some wonderful messages and spirit today, and I'd like to introduce them to you. Since the 1990s, Harold W. Becker has dedicated his life to the purpose of unconditional love. His nonprofit, the Love Foundation, has been sharing this message around the globe for the last more than 2 decades. And Harold has written several books on the subject, and he established, and many celebrate, the Global Day of Love, which is May 1st. Hello, Harold.
Hello, pleasure to be here.
Benjamin R. Wiener is a naturalist, a humanist, an environmentalist, and an adventurer. He majored in environmental science and was corporate counsel to an alternative energy company in the early days before these kinds of things caught on. He thinks deeply about our Earth and about humanity and is in the process of inspiring a change movement, which is presented in the book he wrote, the culmination of his life's work, titled Outposts of Change. Welcome, Ben.
Oh, thank you, Jennifer, and thank you so much for putting this presentation together.
Thank you. Chelan Harkin had a mystical experience in her early 20s, and since then, inspired poetry has been streaming through her, and she has consciously made this her spiritual path to be a vessel for this inspiration, and the rest of us are blessed by it. She is also influenced by Hafiz. She's published her poetry. 2 of her titles are Susceptible to Light and Let Us Dance, the Stumble and Whirl with the Beloved. I'm so glad you're here, Chelan.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
So we get to hear from each of them now again more about, how they came to what they're doing now and how they, I always say how they chose it or it chose them. And, generally under the theme of peace, but they may describe their own work in another way. So, Harold, would love to hear from you about where you've come from, where you're at, where you're going.
Okay. Where I came from, well, first there was a big bright light, and then, oh, wait a minute, I'm too far back. My background is very interesting because I have kind of come into this, it chose me, I chose it kind of simultaneously. And for what I think a lot of us lovers and peacemakers out in the world, it's an awareness that kind of shows up into our world, and it becomes such a cognized understanding fairly quickly that it becomes fire within us to move forward. So my background is interesting from the standpoint that I was working full-time and going to school full-time, pursuing a business degree and working in the business world. And over that time period in the 80s, I kept finding myself bumping up into realities where I understood theory from school and I understood what was going on in the business world. I understood upper echelon and visions. I also understood front-facing employees. And there were a lot of gaps everywhere. And I think I started to notice these gaps. And part of that then became, what is life really about? I think there was a percolation of understandings. That kind of culminated in an awakening one day where I thought, I'm doing everything right for what I perceive I'm supposed to be doing out in the world, but I'm not happy. And I think once I found that kind of understanding, I decided to pursue who am I really? And it was not necessarily a mystical experience, or it was really a pragmatic experience, which followed my business world acumen. And in that aspect of pursuing who I was and figuring out who I was, I also started to notice certain themes. I started to realize that I had choice in life. I had choice over my thoughts and feelings, things that nobody ever told me or taught me. And things started to make much more sense. I also started to see this theme of love come up over and over and over again. I read a book by Houston Smith, reading a book to kind of inform a message, and that message was love. So that seemed to be the obvious elephant in the room, like it's all about love. So around 1990, I decided to just walk away from everything I'd been doing, and I was going to go find this understanding of love, never expecting to incorporate it into what has become, decades later, kind of a global outreach with our nonprofit, just simply inspiring people to love unconditionally and helping people to understand a very useful way of looking at unconditional love, that love is already within us. What we have within, we give out. What we give out, we get back. Some really super simple, basic tenets that I was never taught. And the Love Foundation as a nonprofit is our way of kind of putting this universal message out in a non-religious, non-political way around the world. And it's just been a spectacular adventure from the nonprofit standpoint. In 23 years, we've connected with people in over 175 countries. I've become aware of cultures. I've become aware of societies and backgrounds. But what I've really become aware of that's so potent and powerful is that there are individuals everywhere on this planet that are aware of love, aware of peace, and are dedicating their lives to this. And we will never probably hear about them in the media or on the social sites. These are quiet individuals who are living a peaceful and joyful life, living a life of love. They understand unity and that power of intention. When you start to put those dots together, it becomes a phenomenal expression upon the planet. We are adding to the light and the love and the peace by our individual pathways. And I am ever so grateful that I woke up to this when I did and started to realize that there was so much more to life on the planet than what I had been conditioned by previously. So for me, every day is an adventure. And that's why I enjoy doing things like this, because I get to meet more people that are on the adventure with me.
Awesome. Thank you, Harold. And I'm pretty sure Chelan's going to add to that just spectacularly here in just a moment. But I just wanted to start introducing her again, that I actually heard her in another interview. And the title of the book, Susceptible to Light. And ever since then, I don't know, that hit me. And I was like, I've got to hear from her again. Anyway, so she's going to kind of share her story, and looks like she might even read to us something. I'm excited. All right, Chelan.
Cool. Thank you, Jennifer. And thanks, Harold. It's great to meet you. It's really inspiring to be around people who are so focused on this heart, mind, and patterns and values. It's so beautiful. Thank you for what you do. I'd love to hear more about it sometime soon. So, hi, everybody. Nice to meet you, whoever might be listening. It's such a wonderful thing to, I'm so grateful that my life has expanded to be able to meet so many new people. It's such a true, extraordinary privilege and joy to meet in this way. And it's fun to remember the unlikelihood of it, just the wild chance of meeting whoever it is that we might, and just what a blessing it is. And I've been trying to call that to mind more. We're on this little earth of just this brief journey, and we all have so much to offer each other. And anyway, good to meet you. So my journey with publishing these books began at the end of 2020. And it was the biggest experience of my life to do this, because it wasn't just about putting books into the world. It was about really diving into myself in the deepest way I yet had, to honor and validate my deepest truth, and to share that with the world. And before that, I'd been really, my experience with, I guess, what you would call the mystical had been very private, and it had been a really, really ultra lonely journey for me, actually. because I didn't have people that I had a few people in my life who were down for this kind of level of interaction, but I felt so outside of the norm, and I felt on some levels weird and different, and I just hadn't really found that many people who were interested in doing what I was doing, and so it was a huge risk to put these poems forward. It was a real coming out experience in many ways, and anyway, so my life has just irreversibly changed in the last couple of years. And the reason that I am, or one of the reasons I have been drawn to, I guess what you could call the mystical realm, which I would describe, Harold, really actually similarly to how you said it, just certain ways of operating and certain ways of identifying with who we think we are just not working very well anymore. And so really, I feel that the what is called the mystical path is really could be defined by the path of just really questioning and exploring who am I really, and what is this really? Is this about making money? Is this about being successful? Is this about whatever, doing those things? Or is it about something much, much deeper and different than that? And yeah, and what drove me into that exploration was just incredible suffering. And just coming into this world as a very sensitive person, and sensitive people really have I believe, fundamentally have the capacity to understand that we are here for love. We really are here. We're wired for love. That is our essential purpose. And then we feel this god-awful dissonance between what we're here for and to be humble, to be truthful, to be loving, to be in joyful service to each other's development and the blossoming of our potential and beautiful gifts that serve us and serve all. And then then this terrible dissonance between that and how we are currently relating, and it can just be more painful for those who are really sensitive. And so, but there's this beautiful evolutionary impulse too that we're wired with, where if the circumstances aren't working, like on a just a purely biological level, if that change happens, or we have to explore new ways of being. And so too, I think, and this is a big part of what gives me hope for just human development and a real leap in consciousness toward love that is more ordered and motivated and driven by love, is that just things are working less and less with these old ways of seeing ourselves and relating to each other in these competitive models, and these models, which is really in many ways a model of hurting each other, of wanting more, and rather than generously, joyfully caring for each other and giving, it's a model of taking and exploitation and fear. And so anyway, that was just so not working for me. And one of the blessings was that it was so not working for me to such at such an acute level pretty early on. So at age 21, after a wild series of interesting experiences, a couple of things happened. One of them was a willingness to explore redefining my relationship with God, or you could say with just being willing to let go of an old paradigm of self-rejection, and experiment with, maybe if I embrace and accept all of myself and am open and honest with my struggles as well as with my strengths, maybe beautiful things will happen for me in the world. Maybe there will be benefit to that. And so that began. And at the same time, I decided to do an experiment in which I would write I gave myself permission to write a bad poem every day for a month. And I did this experiment because I was so hungry for an authentic connection in myself and an authentic ability to express that with the world. And I felt like poetry might be a key to that. But I was so blocked in so many ways by fearing that it wouldn't be good enough, that whatever, it would be humiliating, it would be bad. So I just decided to try to embrace that. And so just to, okay, cool, I'm so afraid I'm going to be bad. Why don't I just go with that? I'm going to write a bad poem every day for a month. So it was this deep and actually profound experiment of acceptance of that. And in that, something profound and transformational happened, in that environment of acceptance that I was trying to cultivate in myself, channels opened. And the second day of that experiment, this poem came through, in which it was a completely transformational experience of expression, in which there was I just wrote this down as quickly as it came, and it felt as though it flowed both from me and from another source. And that's where my poetry's been coming ever since. So I will read you this poem, and then I'll tie this up with a little bow of some kind, and then I'll pass the baton to Ben. So here's this first poem that came through in this way, and it's called Say Wow. Each day before our surroundings become flat with familiarity, and the shapes of our lives click into place, dimensionless and average as Tetris cubes. Before hunger knocks from our bellies like a cantankerous old man, and the duties of the day stack up like dishes, and the architecture of our basic needs commissions all thought to construct the four-door sedan of safety. Before gravity clings to our skin like a cumbersome parasite, and the colored dust of dreams sweeps itself obscure in the vacuum of reason. Each morning, before we wrestle the world and our heart into the shape of our brain, look around and say, wow. Feed yourself fire. Scoop up the day entire like a planet-sized bouquet of marvel sent by the universe directly into your arms, and say, wow. Break yourself down into the basic components of primitive awe, and let the crescendo of each moment carbonate every capillary, and say, wow. Yes, before our poems become calloused with revision, let them shriek off the page of spontaneity. And before our metaphors get too regular, let the sun stay, a conflagration of homing pigeons that fights through fire each day to find us. Thank you so much. So just in summary of my life and of my poetic process and of all, this journey has been just knowing that there is an incredible potential for love in this world, and that is our purpose here in life, absolutely. And for me, there's been this dynamic process, I'll say, of just really needing to find a way to relate to and embrace my own suffering rather than reject and repress or project it. And so that has been really the fulcrum of the transformational journey, from a way that was disconnected and uninspired and in many ways out of touch with love, to just this wide embrace of acceptance and forth on the heels of that experience, which is just really a beautiful confirmation of that. And so anyway, thank you. It's an honor to share.
Thank you, Chelan. Yes, that just deepens the nice, really wonderful feeling I'm having here. And I like the wow part because, and I think it's Glennon Melton. She wrote something about being wowed by your refrigerator. It's a box that keeps things cold. And we can kind of choose that if we will. That's wonderful.
Yes. Thank you.
Well, I think we're actually getting a theme here already for me in my mind of some personal experiences that then kind of blossom into the ability to share it with other people. And I guess that's always the case with human beings if we want that, but it's kind of getting emphasized here. And I think this is going to be kind of Ben's story too, the things that have been deep inside him. And then he's taken the moment lately to try to share that more widespread. And yeah, Ben, build on what we're talking about and give us your unique perspective of what you're passionate about these days.
Thank you, Jennifer. First, I'd love to be able to recognize both Harold and Chelan's work. Harold, I took a quick look at your website and note that we do share things in common. Number one, the fabulous photograph you have behind you is something very similar to a photograph that's on the first page of the Outposts of Change website. It's the background for some meaningful words. But importantly, what I pulled from your own website is that you've recognized that we are operating obsolete systems, social systems within which society operates, and they have to be changed. And you come at it from a perspective of love being a process of change that needs to be built into society. And I think that that's fabulous. Actually, the very end of my book is a reflection of that. And it's basically my vision of what the circle of life is and what it is necessary to bring humans back into continuity with that. And it really is 3 words, which embrace the message you're putting forward, Harold, and also Chelan and Jennifer. And each word begins with the letter L in order to really evolve a better way of being, to create a species that is not just attempting to survive on the planet, but one that really is intending to thrive. We have to do 3 things. We have to learn to love, and we have to love in order for us as a species to live and to move into the future. And a purpose of our life, a greater purpose of our life, of being, is to live to learn. And so the last word of each one of those 3 little segments, learn to love, love to live, live to learn. The last word becomes the first word of the next, and that makes what I consider to be the circle of life for humanity. I got there. So Harold, thank you. Chelan, I wanted to comment that you just in your little introduction basically said the same thing that Harold was saying, that I'm saying, is that we have to change fundamentally in order to really thrive. And I looked at your website, and I congratulate you on recognizing. And one of the poems that stood out for me personally was one that you called "The Worst Thing We Ever Did," which was to put God in the sky and pulling divinity from the leaf. I think that that's beautiful. I think it's accurate. I think it presents what is the human trend to think of ourselves as separate and distinct from all that is the natural way of being, all that is life in this universe. And that is a fundamental mistake. And I congratulate you for recognizing that and for being able to convey that commentary in words. It's really difficult. So, wow, that's amazing. With respect to me, I'll just spend a little bit of time on that because I really would like to talk about the steps that we can take, each of us individually and collectively, to create a better humanity. I got here, as Jennifer said, I have a background in science. I have a background in the law. I was corporate counsel to a high-tech energy company in the early 80s that was looking to create what they now call green hydrogen. And we were looking to create that using solar technologies. This is 1980, to electrolyze water, to create hydrogen to run cars on. Absolutely a 100% clean process, environmentally and socially. In any event, that was part of my direction. And then I would say for the past at least 50 years, I have been watching how we humans do almost everything that we do. And I've reflected upon that and thought about, well, okay, we're doing so many things in so many ways that are not beneficial socially or environmentally. How can we change those? And I recognized that there were all kinds of movements, thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of movements of people, both one or two people to major multinational movements of progressive change, where people all over the world recognize the absolute need to change our ways if we are to survive, for one, the environmental devastation that we've created and the social devastation that we've topped on top of that. And then to thrive, which should be our collective goal. And so over 50 years, I thought about this and eventually got to the point where I said to my wife, I have a book inside me. I don't know what it's going to look like, but I can't do it here. I need to go into seclusion. I took myself up into the mountains for 2 6-month winter periods in the Sierras. And I set about putting thoughts onto paper with deep research that supported that. And that created way too much in the way of a piece of work. And it took me years to reduce the words down to something that I thought other people could digest. And it's still difficult. The first part of this book is, for many people, difficult to read because it's reality that we really don't want to acknowledge. It's a harsh reality that is all scientifically based and supported, that shows we are at the edge of the cliff. And if we keep following the pathways that we're on, we're going to take our trainload of humans and fly it right over the edge of that cliff. And the Anthropocene, which is a scientific term that people have created for this age, will take us out with it. And that's an age of extinction. So how can we change that? How can we create and change humanity? And what I noticed and came to understand is that all of these movements, these millions of movements, well-intentioned, are movements basically of resistance. They're trying to slow and change the things that we do from within. And they're separate and disparate. And if they are to be successful, they need to coalesce. We need to form one movement of movements that bring hundreds of millions of people, if not billions of people, together with common goals for the common good. And we can do that. And I suggest in this work what those common goals might be. There are 5 fundamental goals that are so simple that each one of us can grasp, and most of us would acknowledge as being goals that they would like to have society embrace for itself, which would bring us to a fundamentally different and superior life experience, one that might enable us to evolve a new way of being. And I think we have reached a critical juncture in the human existence at which we either make the choice to fundamentally change how we are or we go extinct. And if we take that evolutionary step, which is really a simple step, but it's ours to take and nobody else is going to do it. But we want to envision it, design it, put it in writing, and then bring enough people together who care to make it happen. Then we can, in fact, create a future worth sending our children into. And I can talk way more about it. Jennifer and I spent an hour, beforehand chatting about it. And I can go on and on, but there are 4 of us here. And I'm certainly, more than happy to talk more, but I turn it back to you to see where you'd like to go, Jennifer.
Thank you. Well, actually, I'd like to give, now that we've kind of been, let everyone say something. Harold or Chelan, do you have any further thoughts or questions, or anybody have questions of each other?
I'd actually like to just take a moment and say, oh, I love all of you, and I just want to hug you because as Chelan, as you started into your presentation sharings, and we're like, yeah, everything that I shared about the Love Foundation, you put all those extra words into why I do what I do. And it's a much bigger picture than, like I say, I'm in service to the world by being in service to myself, in the sense of that wow has to come from me. And I have not been attracted to a book of poetry, and I can't tell you how long, but I so want to read yours. And just because I just could tell that what you wrote and write and what you're doing embodies everything that we kind of front face out into the world through the Love Foundation. Clearly, as you look at our website, there's an enormous amount of understanding that goes with that. And then Ben, your presentation is like, oh my God, that's again everything that we're about. And we know what we're doing with Love Foundation is that integral part of reminding people about love from a practical, pragmatic standpoint, rather than a religious or philosophical or psychological or physiological, kind of love. It's the universal love. And I'm like, oh my God, these are the days that I get excited about, because I'm realizing there's so many beautiful souls on the planet doing the piece of their part of the puzzle. And it's so incredibly brilliant to meet you two now in this lifetime at this moment. And Jennifer bringing us all together is so cool. And keep adding to that light, because the very aspect of what is happening is you guys, and yes, there'll be many more conversations with all of you. Didn't want to question, I just had to say that. Thank you.
Awesome. Yeah, Chelan, if you.
I was just going. Thank you, Harold. Thank you so much. And thank you, Ben. Thank you so much. And as I sit here listening to you, feeling that we're all different faces, kind of urgent need, coherent kind of way. And absolutely, I completely loved everything you said and so resonated with it. And at once this combination of this coherence and this diversity kind of angles, maybe approaches at this whole the need for this complete revolution of paradigm, of way of operating, and I'm touched by that, by you doing that, Harold, with this beautiful Love Foundation, and also, and more fundamentally, just with the particular energies that you yourself bring to that. And then I feel such deep love in you and such deep enthusiasm about this. And then Ben, I was just so touched by qualities of humility in you and dedication to your path and all that you're doing. And then I don't know, it's just so beautiful, and it's so, we need each other. I think also is what I was really feeling while listening to you, and just how much more exponentially powerful we are when people who are dedicated to this value of transformation through opening to and aligning with love are when we join forces. And so my question, I guess, to all of us is, do you have any ideas where people can, how do we connect? How do we join forces? What do you think? How do we do this?
And I think we'll start with Ben because that's where he's been thinking about for a while. But yeah, go ahead,
Great.
Ben.
So thank you for the question, Chelan. From what I have observed and thought about, I am clear that the only way for there to be enough mass, enough power, enough momentum, it's a physics thing, to change the course of humanity is to gather together enough people who agree to move essentially in a new direction, who agree to say, okay, let's design a single system of global governance that allows people to operate at the local level to meet their local needs, but just sets a general set of rules and regulations that everybody across the board has to abide by. We've attempted that. You had the League of Nations after World War I and the United Nations after World War II. And the people that put them together, the leaders of the world, refused to empower a new global sovereign. So they were ineffective and they really have failed their missions. There are, like I said, billions of people today that are engaged in helping us be better at being human, doing the things that we do in better ways, from one or two people in a local community to, a unified, to different movements around the world, each doing their own thing. What we have to do is take a movement like Harold's and bring it together within an umbrella organization that embraces what he's doing and helps him enable him to do what he's doing, and put them in tune with other organizations that are similarly directed to enable a better, humane humanity. And that begins with our goals. So if we were to say, people get turned off by the idea of one system of global governance. I say, well, if the one system of global governance had one goal and everything that it did within that system was to enable you at the local level, enable your well-being, enable you to have a sense of peace and well-being, wouldn't you want to be part of that system? I think most people would. So it's a simple goal that most people can agree to. A second goal would be, well, how do we conduct our affairs? That's in commerce. That's a chain of commerce. We deliver the goods and services we need and want. So how can we make that better? Because today they take advantage of people all over the world. They pay as little as they can operating within capitalistic systems, and they pass on the life work of most people, the benefits of those, through profits to a few people who govern the planet. And that's neither fair nor sustainable, particularly because it forces us to contaminate the environment. It allows irresponsible actions to proliferate, and we insulate those who are responsible for making those actions. We insulate them from responsibility. So that needs to change, and we can create one goal for how we do our affairs, that everything that we do within it would target, and that would be, we produce everything that we produce and deliver it in ways that are as efficient as reasonably possible within the timeframes that they're being conducted. That means that we create evolving systems of commerce that are enabled to change as rapidly as technology is available. They basically become living systems of commerce. And you'll run into the argument that is used to justify every reason why we can't accomplish something in society. And that argument is we can't afford to, which is the biggest lie that has ever. And today we have blockchain technologies that enable us to create money in the same ways that banks do, digitally on a computer. And then, but what it does is it allows you to create it in forward-looking ways. And I'm going to give you one example. One of the most necessary things that we have if we are to be able to solve the untold number of problems that we have created for humanity is we have to educate everybody as rapidly as we can and provide them with the highest level of education they are capable or want to obtain from cradle to grave, free of charge, and through a global system of education that we fund by creating a global fund that creates money for this purpose. That way you can then create the collective that enable systems of commerce to engage people in doing the things that they need. Well, how do we know what people need? Well, we use our system of governance to conduct an annual survey of the people locally that tell their local representatives what their most needs are, and those are prioritized. Those become a directive to those who govern locally with respect to what they are charged with making happen in the community or enabling to happen in their community. You again run into the thing well, we can't afford to have a clean water system for our community, or we can't afford to have good education or good healthcare, or you name it. Good sewage systems or good roads or the other good I don't know, systems of education that would be available to people. Well, when you create funds for those particular purposes, then you can. And you can design those funds so that when the money anticipates all of the hands that it has to go through in order to work its way through to the end to deliver whatever product or service that it is, you can design it so that the money never accumulates in anybody's pocket beyond the true value of the services that they render. And that is a really big thing. So you can eliminate huge social inequalities by designing and agreeing to use money differently. Anyway, that's a long-winded answer to the question. I apologize if I took up too much time.
No, it's fantastic. It's this type of comprehensive vision is so satisfying. And I just really, really deeply commend you for having thought it's considered this at such a scope and scale as is just absolutely necessary, and so beautiful to hear you lay that out. Thank you so much, Ben.
Yeah, thank you so much. I have to tell you that in my full year of seclusion, 2 6-month periods, there were times where I was in tears because the task was so hard for me to put onto paper and to visualize something that I can now titrate down to 10 minutes of talk. I thought, one person can't do this. And the reality is that one person can't. I can visualize this and maybe start a conversation, but it takes millions, hundreds of millions, ultimately probably 2 billion people to say we're going to try something different. And it can start. Jennifer suggested to me that maybe I pass something on that is a simple way to get started. So I'm gonna give you one idea that we can talk about, and that is if we created a paradigm in society, and I think Harold would love this. If we created a paradigm in society that teaches people from the youngest age and on throughout life and is reinforced with, do one thing every day, no matter how small, no matter how inconsequential you think it is, to help make a better world. And then teach your children to do that, have it taught in the schools and repeated in society throughout the lands. Imagine what would happen. So we have 365 days a year. If you had 2 billion people doing that, that'd be 730 billion actions making a better world. In 10 years, that's 7 trillion 300 billion actions that would absolutely transform the human life experience. It could start really small, start really local. Can be anything from smiling at somebody across the street who's having a bad day, helping an elderly person get out of a chair or across the street or get some food, to anything that you can think of. And we can really then, in short order, change the human life experience for the better of all of us and create the future that most people want. But as Harold says on his website, it will take a lot of effort, and it'll take a lot of coordination, and it'll take a lot of people who are willing to give up a little bit of their resource for the common good. And that's something that I kind of struggle with, because my thought has been, when you create a movement of change, and in my book I call it the movement because it's a movement that embraces all other progressive movements, the ask would be the leaders, the people who are the head of each of those movements, to both individually and collectively ask the people of their movements to dedicate 1%, just 1% of their resources. And the resources can be anything. It doesn't have to be monetary. It can be time, it can be brain power, toward the collective good. And organize that within the movement so that, let's say we know right off the bat we want to create a blueprint of change. What's that going to look like? What's that going to mean? Can I define it myself for the rest of humanity? No. I can envision parameters of it, but it means we need to create a global constitution. And it means we need to look at how to restructure our systems of commerce. And how can we create the funding structure that enables all these things to do things without entrapping people in inescapable debt. Anyway, those are, that's more depth, the process. And I
thank you.
Back over.
I think Harold has got some riffing he wants to do on that. Go ahead,
Something
Harold.
of the business. I so absolutely agree with Ben, because you're outlining a framework of understanding a vision of what we're becoming. I'd like to add back in a perspective that I've come from and come to understand, and it's through decades of my own observation of humanity, because like you, I'm forever looking at humanity and looking at what are the fundamental things that make us all tick: the smile, the laugh, the love, the cry. These are the things that we share all across the planet, regardless of any kind of background or understanding. I mentioned that I really didn't come from a religious background, so the work I do and the work I share, I very specifically use universal vocabulary, universal understandings, because so many of the current paradigm, a certain word is used and there's an instant relationship to the definition based on that individual. And I like to dance around the big, broad picture, and I can say fundamentally studying everything from humanity and the real time, the pragmatic, to super esoteric, and synthesizing all that, I will actually say that we are in the very process that you're outlining. The very thing that you are seeing and wanting to coalesce is actually happening. So just for example, in the rapid progress in the past 100 years on the planet, phenomenal progress. And then, of course, phenomenal challenges that go with it. Systems that worked at the time and then they became something else. We've never actually experienced this length of time on the planet without a significant war. We've got a lot of battles, but really since World War II, World War I, World War II were really the same energetic. There was really, the same kind of phenomena that's there, the war phenomena that's been around for a very long time. It is evolving, it is changing, and we are actually going into this very understanding that you're speaking of we're just not seeing it in media. We're not seeing it in universities. We're not seeing it being taught specifically, mostly because we, in fact, are the ones that are bringing it into the reality. We upon this planet, each one of us here has had our own, say, pathway, and then levels of awakening, stripping away the illusion of the belief systems that we thought we had to play by. And we have begun to explore our creative nature. And I think this is where I would add in a very foundational piece for me is I became aware, and I'll just summarize them quickly. There's only one moment, this now. And in this moment, we are spiritually, physically, emotionally, and mentally a being. And the quickest way we can actually come to that is taking that deep breath. That's my one thing that I always share with people is what can you do right now? Take a deep breath, because with that deep breath, you're actually living in the present moment. Now, in this present moment, we have our mind, our thoughts, and we also have our imagination, which is also our thoughts. So in this moment, we have the ability to utilize what the brain has accumulated as experiences and what it perceives as knowledge and understanding, factoids. We also have the power of our imagination. When we realize our thoughts and feelings create our reality, then we realize that it's very important to be tuned within our own personal thoughts and feelings. And in fact, that is how we actually create different worlds, is because we bring that personal power back into ourselves. This disparity that is out there is because we're disconnected from us. We don't have a recognition of our own whole self. Like we are, from cradle to grave, our own being. You know, if somebody touches us, we're not actually feeling them touch. Our nerve centers are in our hands. We're interpreting what they're doing. Sexual activity is the same way. We're not actually, we're interpreting everything. We're interpreting all of our reality, the vibrational aspects we now know as quantum physics. We are the ones that are actually interpreting based on our long-held beliefs as to what we think reality is. And that disparity of that fragmentation that has gone on between our minds and our greater self is really where a lot of this has come to. It's been so fragmented and so fractured. Part of what we do with Love Foundation, again, is an aspect of it, but it really is about coming back to self and loving ourselves so unconditionally that we are so at peace with ourselves and so in tune and in touch with ourselves that as we walk about into the world, whether we voice a word or not, because ultimately I get this. I mean, I know nothing. I love knowing nothing because then everything's possible. You know, I don't go around knowing anything. Then I can actually learn things as I go out, which comes right from your statement, Ben. Always loving to live to learn, you know, and that's just every moment for me. What I do realize, though, is being a more integrated entity, a being, realizing who I am as a creator being, that my thoughts and feelings create my reality. And I'll just share, if that for the audience that's listening, or if somebody's slightly not quite understanding that, well, right where we are, if you're sitting watching this, if you're sitting in a room, you know, the chair, the room, the house, the building, wherever you're at, what was it before it was that physical structure? Before it was a physical structure, it was lots of resources. Before it was lots of resources and labor that put it together, it was blueprints. What was it before it was a blueprint? It was an imaginative idea. Somebody wanted your house, your building, your chair to come into manifestation. And by doing so, all the requisite, with enough feeling, the power of the intention, the will, along with the feeling to actually manifest it, that's how we create in the world. So for me, the missing link is ourselves. And our religions, our governments, you know, the way things have been, we have been so outwardly focused because it's a very tantalizing world, a very beautiful world. And part of why I chose this, because I'm the earth, when you stand at, you know, you look at the background of what I have behind me, that earth picture, it's pure peace, it's pure love. You cannot look at it and see strife or anything else. It's just brilliant in its own right. So why is it down to a detailed minutia, do we get so caught up in who's doing what to whom, it's because we are not connected to ourselves. And fundamentally, and I will just be willing to say, based on meeting each of you kind of for the first time today and hearing very briefly your story, it's the same story. We all woke up in a sense that we became more aware of ourselves in relationship to the world around us. And I can say that in the 80s, if I had not begun to look around and begun to ask the fundamental questions, I would have probably just stayed on a banking career, 40, 60 years, retire, whatever, and go on. But in fact, by questioning my reality, answers started to flow in, which Chelan has so brilliantly explained to us already. When you open up, you open that heart, all new solutions begin to rush in. I will say that in more or less 33 years of consciously doing this, 23 years with Love Foundation, but doing this very consciously for well over 30 years in this lifetime, nothing I'm doing the last 30 years are any of the things that I thought I would be doing prior to that. So by opening up, I went off in a completely different direction that each one of us have already kind of shared a very similar story. We'll multiply that over and over again. And I'll share an example that the Love Foundation, when we chose to start it in 2000 as a nonprofit, it was an extension of what we were already doing. Had a very broad, general, inspiring people to love unconditionally. That's our litmus test. We only do what we do if it answers that question. Does it inspire? And then we have a variety of programs, but they all kind of come under that. I get information from people. I'm like, wow, that's a really cool project. And it actually answers inspiring people to love unconditionally, but I don't need to do it because they're doing it. So I've realized that over time, we built the Love Foundation as a non-membership organization. We built it with the idea that it would be universal. We would share it and people would find us. So we don't advertise. We don't fundraise. We are putting into practice over these last couple of decades the very things that I'd like to see a different world of. I've found that as doing this, we are actually, all of us are kind of doing this on the planet because the people that I've connected with around the world, they're waking up like us. We are purposefully like acupuncture points all across the planet. But in fact, the very paradigm that you speak of, Ben, I feel is actually in motion. It's just not outwardly known yet, and it's not a vision, but it is actually driven because the intensity of fire within each of us is that we are envisioning a better world for all. And this is a common theme. If you go back to thoughts and feelings or imagination, that powerful intention is actually driving the very things that we are beginning to see as these old systems can't stand that energy of light and love. They are becoming more obvious in recent years. And it's not that it's new. When you go back into Roman times, you go back down thousands of years, nothing we are doing as humans is necessarily new right now. It's just the structures we've placed on it. But in fact, what is new is we've never had this many people individually, on purpose and on time, waking up around the world saying, there's got to be more. What does that mean? And I can only speak from my own personal perspective. I am really quite clear that this is actually in motion, has been in motion for a long time, but more recently gaining more and more momentum. And it's beginning to outpicture in the newest children that are beginning to show up on the planet. They're wired differently. They do not have these polarities and dualities that we grew up with in our age and our generation. They simply see a more cohesive world, and they will be the leaders coming down the pike. But we're the bridgers. We're the ones that came from this old paradigm. We see the new paradigm, and we're sitting here saying, look, young ones coming in, yes, we agree, we see this. Don't focus so strongly on what's wrong with the world. Focus on the visualization of the intention of the power of the potential, the future of the world. And the only way we can do that is if we are in touch with ourselves, because that's where all the inspiration, all the creativity actually comes from. And Ben, you mentioned the in essence, the quiet sabbatical. I can remember writing my first book in 92. It was, I would say, painful is not quite a word because it's not a physical pain, but it was it was very distinctly, noticeably challenging to sit and bring forth really super simple wording to very complex and universal and timeless understandings. But it was just like my goal, and I ended up writing my first book in 6 weeks. It was just a dedication of sitting there, and it was just a matter. But I can remember writing a paragraph and then laying on the floor because I'm like, oh my God, I can't think anymore to the next paragraph. But in the end, when I was done, it's coalescing countless amounts of paradigms into universal truths in modern verbiage. Like, for example, my explanation, my definition for unconditional love is an unlimited way of being. Most of people, close to 8 billion people on the planet, they're going to either say it's God, or if you have man's best friend, it's going to be a dog. Those are the only two entities can actually love unconditionally. And I'm like, that makes no common sense. Common sense is love must be something that is already intrinsically in us. We know it, we understand it. When I say unconditional love to somebody for the first time, I can tell that they know what that means, even if you go beyond the words. They just have a reaction, different than just saying love. So for me, I dedicated my presentation to the words of unconditional love because I understood that if I didn't love myself, there was no way I could love the world around me. And if I didn't love the world around me, I would be automatically in resistance with everybody I met. By having love for myself, I can go out into the world, I can accept everybody right where they're at. And by seeing them as also potentially loving being, even if they don't recognize it, I can draw that out. And I'll kind of close this little tirade here in a moment with one of the examples that I've experienced. We have a former friend. We're now in Orlando, right by Disney World, about 10 minutes away. I have a former friend from families in Tampa. And it's been really interesting because I've watched over the years this older lady, retired lady, who have known for all these years. She can have a phone conversation with my mother, and they get into certain paradigms, clashes. She can get on the phone with my father, and they have a whole different set of paradigm clashes. And they, we all love her. She's a very, sweet friend of the family. When she comes and I talk to her, she and I have a conversation that is not that far from this one we're having right now. In other words, we don't talk about anything. We talk about the potentials. And she has been of somewhat meager means, retired, but every year, consistently on Global Love Day, she has sent a small check donation to our nonprofit because she sees something in what we're doing that is just resonates to our heart. And yet here I'm having a distinctly different conversation with the same lady than my own parents are having individually with the same lady. So clearly who we are dictates very much the experience we have when we go out in the world. So I very much agree, Ben, you have a beautiful vision. We absolutely are moving towards that and need to move towards that. And we do it, from my perspective, from a foundation of being in touch with ourselves, being in touch with our thoughts and feelings. And from that standpoint, we can go around and hope to inspire, because we cannot change anybody. We can't really even change ourselves, but we can change the way we look at the world. And in doing so, we can be in a crossing of a path. We can be a potentially pivotal moment because we see potential where others see hopelessness. We see love where other people might see hate. We see kindness and act on these things. Clearly, that's a big part of it. We're making these, my choices are every day different than it would have been 30 years ago. And it's an always evolving process, but we're the ones we've been looking for. And then by doing this, and I applaud each of you, because Jennifer, I know you're hosting this, but clearly you have such an incredible vision to create these peacemaker sessions, which is a beautiful piece of the puzzle, because without you, we wouldn't be having this conversation. And without Chelan and Ben, we wouldn't be expanding upon our potentials and actually seeing the fruits of our understanding manifest, because that's what I see in each of you. You're living it. And that is the most important, most awesome thing that you could ever do, is living it. The rest is going to take care of itself. That's my perspective.
Harold,
Thank you for indulging me a few moments.
I did have just a couple things come through for me, and then I feel like we have a couple more things that are going to be emerging here. But I think one thing that, and I'm gonna hopefully not speak for Ben too much, but when I'm hearing him, it's like we kind of, in the past, peace and this kind of things has been an internal heart thing, and we need to move it back out into our structures. And how do we do that? And I think it, like you said, I think it is happening. And not everybody, just people who feel called to it, I guess, but like sometimes in the past when we said heart or love or peace, we also did not want to talk about money because that seemed like it was over here. We didn't want to talk about politics because, politics and love in the same sentence didn't seem like it go together. But now we do need to get comfortable. Like people who are interested in peace need to be comfortable with money. Not everybody, but as we feel called to this, and again, it is happening. I think, and one of a previous guest I had in Sacramento, they have what's called I'll probably get this wrong, but in Sacramento they have what's called the Compassionate Capital Region. And if I'm being super honest, I don't completely understand what they're doing. But what I do know what they're doing is they're putting compassion and capital, which is money, in the same sentence. And they're trying to do it as a group. And so it is happening. We just need more of it. We're not done yet. And then I think there's also the oneness that we see can happen, and it can happen, in my opinion, this is just my opinion, in a decentralized way. I think it will turn into that. This is just my opinion, but I think it will turn into that oneness, because we do kind of all see that we have some missing pieces still. We have the last, some things that still need to happen. But as you're saying, Ben, I liked your, living locally or making local choices, like in the neighborhoods, like where we really see people and really meet people. And we're not done yet. We absolutely. And so we continue to need your inspiration, but I think it is happening. And I think it doesn't necessarily have to be under like a ruler per se, or, because I think the more love and peace we get into it, we will handle the decentralization easier and the differences easier. Anyway, that's just kind of what I wanted to add to that as a possibility anyway. But Chelan,
one more little
go ahead.
piece,
Sure.
Since you brought it up, one of the things we created starting in 2004 was Global Love Day, each May 1st. And it's our way of saying, let's celebrate our humanity. It's universal. We broadcast it out there. And, what we found we didn't go local, we went global. And as a result, we got people connecting with us from around the world. Some of the very first one were the African nations. Total surprise to us. And we went out to peacemaking organizations as a way, because back in 2003, 2004, when the internet email addresses were about the only way you could contact people. It's very different now. But we started that, and this is our 20th year of putting out Global Love Day, and we've always just broadcasted out there. It's a celebration of our humanity. Love begins with me is kind of the underlying theme. But it's poignant at this moment to share, because we're also in the time period where we're doing it. One of the footnotes of Global Love Day that we started in 2004 that was kind of almost out of context seemingly, is we went out and we encouraged people, mayors, governors, councils around the United States, to issue proclamations, just ceremonial documents. But we went ahead and just started writing cities, because in our world, people that are in governing situations, they're really in service. And in their heart, they got into it because they're service oriented. So we just went ahead and typically nonprofit. We were in Tampa at the time. We would get a Tampa proclamation. We went national and in a way global. But the very first proclamation that embodied the 6 tenets of our vision of Global Love Day was from Rocky Anderson of Mayor of Salt Lake City. And I remember him putting out a press conference doing this first proclamation, and the articles were scathing. I mean, like, how dare you? What ridiculousness is this superficial Global Love Day? But at the very last sentence of the last paragraph, the reporter wrote in one of them said, I really hope this takes off. So there is this love for love. There is this love for peace. And what happens is most of the dialogue is not covering that. Well, we have continued this process of simply inviting, with no collateral, no favoritism, no anything, putting out a request as part of Global Love Day. Again, it's a footnote. It's not the focus. But we've gone out to leaders around the globe, but particularly United States, Canada, and Western centric countries, this idea. We just broadcast it out there, and they are totally of free will to choose it. And doing something on a national or international scale is unusual. They usually look for constituency. 20 years later, we have 845 proclamations from 29 governors of the United States, over 275 cities, also the Dalai Lama, one from England. And if you actually go to our website and look at the Global Love Day, the tenets that we are asking or talking about, which relates to exactly what we're saying, is we're one humanity on this planet. All life is interconnected and interdependent. All share in the universal bond of love. Love begins with self-acceptance and forgiveness. With respect and compassion, we embrace diversity. Together, we make a difference through love. That is a really weird proclamation to ask for to a governing body, a mayor, a council, governor. And yet, by putting this out there unconditionally, non-politically, not looking for anything other than here's an idea, here's a vision. Over 20 years, we have impacted that many cities and that many governors. It's really, it's kind of unheard of, but to make a point of this, and I'm just sharing this because when we are doing what we're doing, writing our poetry and developing a framework, each of these visions are potent resources for people to synchronistically find in the right moment in their life, and then they can add to that energy. Even if they're not there, they do resonate with this. And what we haven't had a lot of is individuals like us being out public and actually sharing this in a public way. Now, I have for a long time, but I've just, and this is uncharacteristic for me, I've done it, but by doing it, we are part of what's making a difference. I just want to share the example from our own experience.
Of the proclamations. Cool. Chelan, what's emerging for you right now?
Oh, yeah. Thank you. Thank you all. So much richness has been shared, and it's been so cool to listen to you both. Thank you. And just at the tail end of what you said there, Harold, lit up something in me just about how to really put yourself out there in the name of love. It is to be seen. It's to be different. It's to be on the outside of the norm. And it takes a lot of courage. And so I just want to, I think one of the most important pieces of this space, Jennifer and Harold and Ben, is it's not even all the many things that we're saying are so valuable as well, but also it's just representing ourselves as going for it with love and being willing to be on the outside of these old models, and that can involve confronting a lot of fear of being different, of making mistakes, of, well, what if I'm on the outside and I'm advocating for love and change, but I'm not doing it perfectly? We can be exposed to a lot of criticism or a lot of contempt or a lot of fear from others who are still holding on to their familiar patterns and paradigms. And so I guess what I want to say to anyone listening is just that it can be hard and gnarly and uncomfortable to claim this, but that I really believe that there are countless people who have this knowing inside of them that what we're here to do is love, and that now really is the time to begin the process of seizing that knowing and of aligning yourselves with others who can validate that. And we actually don't need all that much validation. A small group of others who exposing ourselves to the encouragement of even just a small group of others who are doing that can be enough, because it's true, and truth is powerful, and love, being here for love is true. And so just having that, but we do need belonging. That's a human need. And so we need to find community and people who can fortify that in us. And then one more thing I want to say is that in this process of moving into a way where we are more open about the need for change and love, where we can become more think of ourselves more as love scientists, love experimenters. How do we do this? How do we make things more sustainable in every space, in ourselves, in our marriages or our partnerships, in our parenting, in our families, in our communities, in our nations, in our world? As we change is uncomfortable and it's humbling. And so I just want to validate the awkwardness of this, the elements of not knowing and not being okay, of maybe not being the smoothest, clearest advocates for love, of needing to learn how to do that. It's a process of development, of it being awkward, of it being scary and lonely at times, and that's all okay. But that it is, if we look at this soberly, it's just there's really no other there's no other purpose really that can be defensible anymore, really, than to just completely to begin a process of really moving in this direction. And also I'll go here, and we're all absolutely going to die. And something that has been on my mind a lot lately is that, actually, I've been experiencing death as this huge surrender moment into the love of all. And love, it is so radical and it's revolutionary because it's outside of the bounds of control and fear, which is so familiar to us all. But that's where we're heading. And so it makes sense on every single level to be dedicating and giving ourselves more and more and more to love. And that's the only thing that's worth our time. And everything else is it's not sustainable anyway. So yeah.
And this is why I do what I do, because I, like you say, I just want people to keep seeing we're all already here. All of us are already here. And even our audience that will probably never get to be on one of these interviews, everybody that's signing up and getting every time there's more and more people in my group, I know that they're all us. You know what I mean? We're all already here. It's already happening. And I just want people to not feel alone. From my piece of it. So the time has passed, actually. We're going to be in the what you call the final minute round, I guess. And I'm going to let you all give some parting words, whatever is sitting there for you. And Ben, go ahead.
So I'm going to bring this back around to the thrust of your conversations, Jennifer, which is peace. And of course, love is a component, but you have to enable it to happen. And I'm just going to read a few little segments, excerpts from my book that relate to, I brought up education, so I'm just going to focus on that for a minute. So my thought is that educating everyone, I've mentioned this, as rapidly as possible is perhaps the single most effective step humanity can take to enable its survival. As, and I'm giving you the quote, and then I'm going to ask you where you think this quote came from, as, quote, each year of education reduces the risk of conflict by around 20%. That's the end of the quote. Where do you think that quote came from? Who do you think put it out there? Was it factually based? Rather than trying to delve up an answer, the answer is it came out of a World Bank paper written in 1999, presented for the Conference of Economic Agendas in Civil Wars in London. The conference was in London. So this is back then. The World Bank has the ability to fund global systems of education. But we don't. We could, but we don't. We have the ability, but we don't. And if you want to bring peace, if you want to bring love into the world, that's one of the things that can be done. And it goes back to what I was talking about with respect to creating a fund. A component of education, there are two aspects. I'm going to give you a Dalai Lama quote, but there are two aspects. You can educate the mind, which is what we do for some of the people on the planet. And that has brought us forward in our human life experience. It has given us things that couldn't be conceived of 100 years ago. But educating the mind without educating the heart is a recipe for our self-destruction. So I'm going to now read a little bit. We educate to expand the foundations upon which to create higher functioning societies. We also educate to enable better ways of being, which requires a different kind of educational process. It requires learning to be comfortable with each other. Call it love, call it whatever you like, but that's the end result. We need to be comfortable with each other. As so aptly stated by the Dalai Lama, my wish, this is the quote, my wish is that one day formal education will pay attention to education of the heart, teaching love, compassion, justice, forgiveness, mindfulness, tolerance, and peace. We have to have all of those components brought into our educational system to elevate the concepts of love and peace in society. We have to create a consciousness of love, consciousness of peace, if we want to manifest that in society. And Harold, you can bring your systems into the educational process. I've spoken with leaders, Ivy League leaders who are creating educational systems that incorporate peace into the educational process from the earliest stages of life to the later stages. You need to do that. And yes, I agree that there are people out there doing this, but I am certain that it has to become part of a coordinated movement. Otherwise, decentralization works well at the local level. And if you give the local people the ability to do that, great, that we can do. But you still have to have the common set of rules that even the playing field, so that we're not forum shopping for a tailor in Bangladesh for $1 a day versus that tailor in Texas for $20 an hour. And so you create a uniform set of rules that you get enough brilliant people together to say, all right, we're going to even the playing field, and we're going to do it in a way that's equitable, socially and environmentally sustainable, and we can create that just world that we're looking for.
I look forward to that world you're envisioning, Ben. It's wonderful. Harold, give us a minute or two with some closing thoughts.
Just to address Ben's one comment, with Global Love Day, we also introduced the Art Essay Poetry Invitational, which is a collaborative global event, not a competition. So we don't have a first, second, third. We're very specific about our wording. But I can recall in early years when we put this out there, I mean, you couldn't talk about yoga in school. You couldn't talk about meditation in school. Here we're introducing this Global Love Day kind of invitational, the themes based on it. And often I'd get packages of entries from teachers who were thanking us in their cover letter because we gave them a universal way to introduce these concepts to their children when they couldn't under other circumstances because of the way the public schooling system and everything was. So I absolutely agree with you. And there's so much more that needs to happen. But there have been times to address each of you, and Chelan, you even kind of commented this. There have been times where I've wanted to walk away from the Love Foundation because it has been challenging with the reactions and the misinterpretation and the misinformation. And yet I go back to what I do have with what we get to experience, what I get to experience every day with this. And I just stay with that. Perseverance is what's gotten us through 23 years. But energetically, I have at times said, what would have happened if I had just pulled the thread of the Love Foundation out as a nonprofit? What little we've done over these last 23 years, and it feels like something would be missing. And that kind of addresses exactly what you were sharing, what each of us are sharing, is that if we don't do what we're called to do from a heart level, it can't happen. It has to happen because each of us have the fortitude, the perseverance, the vision, the courage, the willingness, the naivete, and ultimately, Chelan, you said this so beautifully, the vulnerability. Because every time we put out a message, which is daily for us, there's a vulnerability because there are multiple ways for people to interpret that. And yet I trust what I share because it's what I live. So however people take it is up to them. What is most important is that I'm doing what I perceive as my piece of the puzzle. And there's definitely a day where the Love Foundation will go away because love has become the common dialogue, the common understanding. And then the last piece I would say, in addressing death, who were we before we came here? And I see a continuity. So there's a death that was more of a return to who we already are, because if there's after death, it has to be before birth. And we just don't talk about that. But that's a whole nother context of what's really driving this is our eternal nature. Our eternal nature is love, not by personality, but our eternal, cosmic, earthly nature is love. That's me.
Thank you, Harold. And Chelan, I actually want to give you full room to decline this if you're not feeling it. But after you say whatever is on your mind, I'm wondering if you would give us one more poem to close us out. If there's one that you would like to share with us, I would love to hear that. But if you're not feeling it, that's okay. But
I'm always feeling it.
But yeah, anything else you want to say, and then let's end on the poem. Unless it's really before your thoughts, however that works for you.
Thank you for that invitation. I'm so inspired. I'm so uplifted after this gathering. It's so beautiful. Thank you. Thank you. I know there are lots of ripples that are going to be coming from this. So, what's most foremost on my heart, I suppose, is encouraging each other to share our gifts with the world. Those things inside of us that we just deeply desire to bring forward and are usually a bit afraid or deeply terrified maybe to bring forward. Those are often the things that matter so much to us. It took me 12 years to find the courage to share this. And these things that are so close to our heart and most precious often feel like a deep risk because they are so vulnerable. They're so close to our heart. They are so often just deeply, deeply loving offerings. And in this journey, I've met so many people who, this journey of sharing myself more fully with others, so many people who have something like this inside of them. And it's a powerful thing that we can do to bring those things forward. And it often shakes up our whole foundation when we do that and we start to share more authentically our gifts. And so I hope that we can, anyone listening can be encouraged to move forward with that and to just take more risks in the name of love. Whatever feedback we get when we move forward with love, that's just information for us to take in, integrate, and then move forward. But if we just keep our intention on the path of being, being stewards of love. There's nothing that we can do that can be our movement in the world will be beautiful. And we just need to learn. Every day is a learning experience about how we can better do that. And I just want to commend everyone, really, just for being alive, all the things that we're navigating. We are at such a fascinating turning point. So much old conditioning from the past that is still active, that we need to contend with and release, and a lot of vision for the new emerging. And it's just a big time. And I just really honor, I don't know, all that are alive on today. Okay, I'll end with this poem, the worst thing that you mentioned, Ben, which is just, its intention is creating the possibility for a broad scale redefinition of things, new way of relating. And I use sometimes God almost in my poetry as a tool for that. Just thinking, you know, for the biggest possible redefinition of how we feel about ourselves and others and everything. So here's this poem, The Worst Thing. The worst thing we ever did was put God in the sky out of reach, pulling the divinity from the leaf, sifting out the holy from our bones, insisting God isn't bursting dazzlement through everything we've made a hard commitment to see as ordinary, stripping the sacred from everywhere to put in a cloud man elsewhere, prying closeness from your heart. The worst thing we ever did was take the dance and the song out of prayer, made it sit up straight and cross its legs, removed it of rejoicing, wiped clean its hip sway, its questions, its ecstatic yowl, its tears. The worst thing we ever did is pretend God isn't the easiest thing in this universe, available to every soul in every breath.
Thank you, everyone. We're going to end there.